So you say that you want enlightenment, you say that you want awakening, but do you really know what that means? Are you ready to let go of everything you've ever known? Are you prepared to shatter your identity, to expand your awareness and your empathy beyond yourself to all beings? This can't just happen overnight. Your body, your nervous system, and your mind isn't ready for the liberating shock of omnipresence. Your body's not fit to contain that vast expanse of energy. So what does it take? And I have personal experience with this as well, of what can happen when this energy flows in too quickly, when the overwhelming current shocks your system and fries your nervous system. We should be thankful that God doesn't give us an enlightenment experience too soon, because we're truly not ready for it. We still have too many attachments, too much selfishness. We're living too much out of alignment with divine law. So what does it take to wake up from that delusion of selfishness and greed and lust? What does it take to overcome these things that we all struggle with? It takes a universal science of yoga taught by the great saints of all religions. Jesus Christ taught this science. He didn't call it yoga, but when the Bible is correctly interpreted, that's what he taught. The same as Krishna taught in the Bhagavad Gita, the same as the Buddha taught. There's minor differences, but at the end of the day, all true religions, the message is you purify yourself through introspection, through meditation, through self-analysis, and through selfless service and action, through being a righteous individual. You purify your consciousness one day at a time. And eventually, and also you pour out your love for God, you have devotion for the divine, and one day seeking, and then you realize, right? That's why it's called self-realization, because it's already who we are, but we've become confused through our attachments. The first two steps of Patanjali's Eightfold Path are called Nama and Niyama, which are the do's and don'ts. And the do's are to treat your neighbor as yourself, compassion for all beings, nonviolence. I mean, that's one of the don'ts actually, but just going through these. You know, just what you've heard in all the scriptures, the 10 Commandments is another expression of it. Just being a good person, honesty, virtue, don't be dishonest, don't fall into lust, things of that nature. That's step one. Step two is asana. You need to have the right posture, carry yourself with confidence, carry yourself with relaxation, and that's going to make the body fit to be able to embody the vitality that awakening brings. Correct posture. Step 4 is pratyahara, or interiorization, learning to bring one's consciousness within, because that's where God lies. That's where you're going to find divinity, right within yourself, right within the spine. Devotion's another important aspect of all this. Just having that love for God is going to do so much for you, because when you love God and when you live your life, every action in service of the divine, God's going to love you and show you the way forward. And in this school of life, there's going to be a lot of lessons. There's going to be tests that we have to go through, but behind it all is God's unconditional love for us, wanting us to embody that awakened state, that God-conscious state. But we just have to put one foot in front of the other, one day at a time, being a little bit better each day. That's what it takes. And getting into my personal experience with this, and now why we should be thankful that God doesn't give us more than we're ready for, is, right now this week when I'm recording this video, I'm at an event called the Self-Realization Fellowship Convocation, and I felt inspired to record this. Some of these thoughts were coming to me in meditation, and but a few months before I found this path, and this isn't something I recommend, it's not something I do anymore. A few months before I found this path, I took a very powerful psychedelic known as 5-MeO malt. And when I would used to take psychedelics, I would go in with the intention of introspecting about some aspect of my life or some aspect of reality. And this time my intention was, I want to see what the true fabric of reality is. I want to see the truth about reality, and be careful what you wish for, because that's exactly what happened. But it wasn't it wasn't what I expected, and it wasn't anything that I was ready for, because the moment I ingested the substance, it was as if you're cranking a dial. Let's say my consciousness was at a 10. It's going from 10 to 10,000 in a matter of seconds. And, one of the first things I remember is it was just all so overwhelming and disorienting. And I tried to go look at a mirror and tell myself, I'm Jake, I'm a human being, just trying to ground myself. And I knew it just wasn't the case. I knew it wasn't true at all. And my identity was completely shattering, and I had no ground to stand on. And after that, my body started convulsing violently because of all the energy that was flowing that I wasn't ready for, that liberating shock. And, I was still trying to find some ground, still trying to hold on to the ego through that, and that caused a great deal of suffering. And, it's probably the most traumatic thing I've ever experienced. I've had a near-death experience before, and once I accepted my death, it wasn't that bad. It was like, oh, what's the big deal? I'm going to die, but I know I'm not this body. That was different. That was much scarier than death itself, because there was no semblance of an identity, essentially, whatsoever, or any semblance of it was actively breaking apart. And eventually I started to meditate. I started to read a spiritual book, and I was able to kind of calm myself down, and then experience that liberation aspect of just recognizing that, oh, of course I'm not a human, I'm just consciousness and awareness looking at a human body moving around. And I had a lot of other insights, just the miraculousness of the fact that the life in the universe even exists, and how it's all just a creation of God. It was liberating. But then what happened was, for the next several months, once I kind of came back down from that, and the ego started to come back, my sensitivity was greatly enhanced. Right at the spiritual eye was a very intense pressure all day long, to the point of basically being painful. I mean, maybe not quite painful, but very uncomfortable, and a very strong sensation at the spiritual eye. And just whenever I would go anywhere, being able to feel people's energies and just being overwhelmed by the senses because they were so enhanced and so tuned up. The dial wasn't at 10,000 anymore once I came down from that trip, but it was still at 1,000 when it was at 10 before I started. So, or maybe, I don't know, maybe it was at 300 at that point when it was at 10 before I started. So everything was very overwhelming for a while. And then over the course of those next few months, I read this book called Spiritual Emergency, which had some good insights to kind of just help me ground myself again. Shortly after that was when I found my path and my guru, Paramahansa Yogananda, and his teachings. And that's just been such a blessing, because with that master's guidance, I've been bestowed spiritual experiences as I'm ready for it, and I know I'm taken care of and being led by God, and that's what we need. We don't need to take a psychedelic and completely fracture our psyche and overwhelm our nervous system. I mean, I'm potentially still dealing with the after effects of that, with tension in the body and whatnot. And maybe it happened for a reason, right? My spiritual eye's been open ever since then. I was never able to feel it before that, and now I am. And some of these things are coming back now. Like this meditation I had tonight was a very intense pressure in the spiritual eye, similar to what I experienced there. And these intuitive sort of psychic ability to sense other people's energies, things of that nature are coming back as well. But it's been a couple of years of daily meditation and devotion and practice of the teachings, practice of yoga very consistently. That's built me up to a point where now I'm ready to activate these abilities, right? All in divine timing. And that's why what we need to do is trust in God. We don't need to think that we need to do it ourselves. And there's a guy I used to watch, actualize.org. Some of you guys might know him, Leo. And that was why I tried out. That was he was my first introduction to spirituality. He was why I started meditating. And I have respect for his work and what he does. But some things I don't agree with anymore, such as that he's a big proponent of psychedelics. And I really don't think that's the wisest path. If you're watching a video like this, or even watching his videos, you already have that spark inside of you to want to know God and know divine truth. And what you need to do is pour your devotion out to God. Keep on kindling that flame of that love for God and that desire to find the truth. And God will bestow upon you what you need in divine timing. Just know that God's always there with you, guiding you, leading you in the best way, giving you the exact experiences that you need. It's just, it's such a blessing when you devote yourself to the spiritual path. And it's going to look different for everyone. Right? If you feel called to look more into Yogananda's teachings, you can DM me on Instagram. I'm happy to help you, or just research it online. It's a great path, but whatever path you end up choosing, right? It's okay to experiment in the beginning. That's what I did. I went through various different kind of teachers. Mostly I started out with like Leo and his stuff online, and a couple other things. And then, you'll know when you find the right path, when it just clicks right away and it just feels so aligned. There's no question about it. So I wish you the best in finding your way through this. Hopefully this was useful or interesting. and I'll see you on the next one very soon.